Hello and welcome to episode 63 of the official EstablisherRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the co-founders here at ETR. As always, I'm joined by fellow co-founder Evan Silva. NFL draft is now behind us. We've gone over the NFC. Today we will do the AFC. Evan, what's going on?
Not too much, man. Ready to break down these AFC teams.
As I said, today's show, we are going to be going team by team through each AFC draft, kind of giving our draft takeaways and their fantasy fallout from each. If you want to hear the NFC version, that is episode 62. The takes and the way we're going to be talking about it today is mostly redraft based. For Dynasty takes, I suggest that you listen to the pod I did with Pat Carrain, episode 61, I believe. And also, we have a bunch of Dynasty stuff up on the site. For now, everything on the site remains free. And let's get to it with the AFC here, Evan. The Baltimore Ravens, the big pick in the fantasy community was obviously the pick of J.K. Dobbins at 55th overall. They have a stable of backs already in Mark Ingram, in Gus Edwards, in Justice Hill, who they invested draft capital in. And I know a lot of people liked last year. But J.K. Dobbins, I think from an all-around skill set, will at least threaten Mark Ingram. And Mark Ingram got around 13 carries per game last year, was lightly used in the pass game. I think J.K. Dobbins is at least a threat to reduce that and kind of get double-digit carries of his own. But how quickly do you think that J.K. Dobbins will make an impact in Baltimore?
I think very, very quickly. And I think that at very worst, he's going to get the Gus Edwards role, and it's very likely that he gets more. Gus Edwards was right around 8 carries per game last season, and J.K. Dobbins is just way, way better than Gus Edwards. It's a huge blow to Mark Ingram's value. I mean, I'm putting together a top 150 right now, and every time I look at it, I want to bump Mark Ingram down more. First of all, he had a ton of touchdown regression coming to him. He scored like 4 receiving touchdowns last year. That's not happening again. He finished at 15 touchdowns all-purpose. That's not happening again. And he's starting to get old. He's on the wrong side of 30. J.K. Dobbins, I mean, he's going to jump in and be extremely effective from an efficiency standpoint. He's going to hit the ground running, I think, in Baltimore.
Yeah, and concerns on Baltimore as a whole when you're starting to project out. Can they generate as many rush attempts? Can they generate the same scoring efficiency? Can they generate the same rushing efficiency as they did last year? And I think they're going to be awesome again, but that was out of control, their efficiency last year. So you can start scaling back a little bit and regressing towards the mean, how many points they're going to score, how efficient they're going to be, and you start to end up with fewer rush attempts. So certainly bad for Mark Ingram. And yeah, I think J.K. Dobbins, certainly long-term, talked about it with Carrain. J.K. Dobbins has a major path to dynasty upside being tied to this offense. Also wanted to mention the Ravens 98th overall. They take Devin DuVernay, and 201st overall, they take James Proche. I'm not sure what you think of those two prospects, but from what I can tell, both are more likely to play inside than outside. So I think Miles Boykin remains in play to start opposite Marquise Brown. But what do you think about those two wide receivers that the Ravens took?
Yeah, I think they're both slot receivers. Devin DuVernay was really, really fast. He ran 4.39 coming out of Texas, kind of built like Golden Tate, kind of like a thicker slot receiver, but very, very explosive. And then James Proche out of SMU, another slot prospect, kind of on the Julian Edelman sort of spectrum. So they really didn't come out of this draft with a vertical receiver, a classic vertical receiver. I thought that they might look at a guy like T. Higgins, but he wound up going 33 overall, not even close to making it to their pick at 55th overall. So yeah, I think that Miles Boykin and Marquise Brown right now look like maybe the likeliest outside receivers, and then Devin DuVernay pushing Willie Snead in the slot.
Let's go to the Buffalo Bills, and I actually like this landing spot for Zach Moss. He can play the Frank Gore role, and he's obviously, I think at this point in his career, gives you more upside than Frank Gore. And I mean, I didn't even list Devin Singletary as a loser because I always expected the Bills to get a back. Like, they weren't coming out of this draft without a back. They had like nothing behind Devin Singletary. Now, that said, Devin Singletary's upside, I think, is going to be capped a little bit. There were times down the stretch last year where Devin Singletary was playing 98, 99% of the snaps after they kind of dusted Frank Gore. So that's not going to happen, I don't think, with Zach Moss in the mix. I'm curious what you thought of Zach Moss originally coming out and how you think he'll fit in Buffalo.
like Zach Moss. I mean, I think that he is going to jump right into that Frank Gore role, as you mentioned. He's a bigger back. He's like 223, whereas Singletary is like 205. So I think that they're complementary stylistically, and then I'm worried about Devin Singletary at the goal line. Like how much work is he really going to get at the goal line with Josh Allen stealing work there, and then Zach Moss doing what Frank Gore did last year. I'm also kind of worried about his receiving because of he had a big playoff game. He had like 8 catches in the playoff game, but other than that, he really didn't have a lot of big games as a receiver. And I think he has that skill set independently. But I think that Josh Allen, the way that he plays, like he's likelier to take off than to check it down to Devin Singletary. So that puts Devin Singletary kind of in a spot where, he's not getting a lot of money touches.
Mm-hmm.
He's not getting the goal line. He's not getting the receiving work. And that really is going to end up putting a lid on his upside if that comes to fruition.
I wanted to take a minute here to pour one out for Robert Foster, formerly known Robert Foster, Australian for sex. Dude goes off down the stretch in 2018, and literally, like, after that, they signed John Brown. Like, Robert Foster can't even get on the field, even though he played so well in 2018. And now they just draft Gabriel Davis. They draft Isaiah Hodgins. And now, like, on a latest roster projection, Robert Foster doesn't look like he's going to make the team. Australian for out of a job. Do you have any idea what happened to Robert Foster? I actually thought he had the chance to like actually be a legit player.
I mean, so did I, but I mean, there were reasons that he went undrafted. There are reasons why he was a really big recruit at Alabama and he really didn't do anything there. And, we just stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about. But I mean, I'm with you. He had a great rookie season, like legitimately great. I think if you adjusted down for how many targets he had, he didn't have a ton of targets, but if you adjusted down for how many targets he had, he averaged the most yards per route run in that entire rookie class, and that was a pretty good one. I think that was DJ Moore's year. But yeah, I mean, just probably the same reasons that led to him going undrafted.
Let's go to the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, they get Joe Burrow at number 1 overall. I'm more interested in how we think that the wide receiver situation is going to play out. Because, man, like if they go 5 deep right now with really good wide receivers, AJ Green, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd in the slot, and then your wide receiver 4 is John Ross, who I thought looked really good when he was healthy last year. They have Auden Tate, who made some serious plays for them. I'm fear a little bit that they're going to actually play 5 receivers. Like there's going to be some rotation here where they actually play 5 wide receivers. We know AJ Green has had injury history and he's getting up there in age. I don't know. How do you think that all these wide receivers are all going to eat with a rookie quarterback, or do you think they're all going to eat?
I think that John Ross might be in trouble.
Yeah.
They put the franchise tag on AJ Green. They signed Tyler Boyd to an extension, I believe, before last season. They used the 33rd overall pick on T. Higgins. So I think that means that John Ross is in trouble and he's going to be a rotational player this season. And did you see if they made a decision on his 5th-year option?
I didn't. That's a good question.
Yeah, because teams are making those decisions like as we speak.
Yeah.
That'll kind of give us a clue. That'll be something to look out for and give us a clue as to whether they really even see him as part of their future. I mean, my guess is that he definitely doesn't get his option exercised, although the Bengals do kind of weird things. I mean, it looks like John Ross can be their 3rd receiver.
We talked about before the draft that Joe Burrow had like a loaded, or for the Bengals at least, a loaded weaponry, and then they go out and add T. Higgins at 33 overall. I mean, Joe Burrow is the favorite. He's around plus 190, 2-1 to be the offensive rookie of the year. Given his weapons and the fact that he plays the quarterback position, I actually think maybe this price should even be a little bit lower than 2-1. But anyways, now that he gets T. Higgins, it seems like Joe Burrow is even more likely to be the standout rookie quarterback. Where do you think you'll end up with him in the top 150, if at all?
Right now he's not in the top 150. I have him at quarterback 22. I want to bump him up, and I probably will. I'm going to try to jam him up a little bit higher because I really do think he's got legit upside. But he's also going to be a rookie quarterback who definitely after the Bengals cut Andy Dalton, Joe Burrow is going to be in there week 1, but he is going to have to learn the offense like through Zoom conferences.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to affect, how effective he is early in the season. I mean, I think that you can, and then the division is just, I mean, the division is not easy, man. The Steelers are one of the best defenses in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Ravens, I think, have gotten a lot better on defense. One of the best secondaries and pass defenses last year. And then the Browns are certainly no pushover.
Yeah, let's talk about those Browns. We talked a lot, and Brandon Thorne talked about a lot when the Browns hype was going off last year. Well, hold on a sec. Their offensive line is one of the worst in the NFL. They addressed that at 10th overall by getting Jedrick Wills. And then they really didn't draft any skill players. They took Harrison Bryant, the Florida Atlantic tight end, in the 4th round. They get Donovan Peoples-Jones, who had these outrageous measurables in the 6th round. I liked both of those picks from an upside perspective. Would not expect either to contribute too much in year one. What'd you think about what the Browns did? I think there's some appeal as a whole for the Browns as like a post-hype sleeper type offense.
Yes, I agree with that. In the draft, they began their draft by drafting Jedrick Wills, one of the most physical offensive linemen in that group of the top 4 picks that all went within numbers 1 through 13. Jedrick Wills coming out of Alabama just kind of reinforces that I think that this team wants to be like balanced kind of from a run pass standpoint. I mean, they've got 2 great backs. They signed Jack Conklin, who is, one of the best run blocking tackles in the league. They're going to be, their offense is run by Kevin Stefanski, whose offense was very balanced in terms of run pass ratio last year in Minnesota. I don't think, and they want to run a lot of play action as well. That's what Baker Mayfield does the best. The Browns kind of got away from play action last year, but that was really the only way that Baker Mayfield maintained any semblance of efficiency in his second season. So I think they're going to go really heavy on play action. They're going to run the ball quite a bit. They're going to try to be really physical up front. They've got a bunch of good linemen. I mean, T. Treader is one of the best centers in the league, and then Conklin and Jedrick Wills, and then Joel Bitonio, of course, at left guard. So, I mean, they've got the makings of a team that's going to run the ball with volume and throw the ball off play action, and Odell Beckham is really their only deep threat. So he's going to be a really interesting kind of topic of debate in terms of can he bounce back from what was pretty much a miserable season last year. But he was number 3 in the NFL in air yards. Just they were so inefficient as an offense.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing the Browns this year for sure. Definitely like them as post-hype. Let's go to the Denver Broncos, who were kind of the talk of the draft with all of the weapons that they have given Drew Lock. 15th overall, they give him Jerry Jeudy. 46th overall, they give him KJ Hamler. And then they go to the shower narrative at 118th overall with his buddy from Missouri, Albert O. If it was any other quarterback, people would be so excited about this Broncos offense. I feel like people are discounting them just because they think Drew Lock is total dust. And maybe he is, but I kind of find it a little bit similar to the Teddy Bridgewater situation we talked about on the previous podcast. Although Denver's defense, I don't think will be nearly as bad as the Panthers' defense will be. I guess the big question of all this, Evan, is what Denver giving Drew Lock enough for him to actually let all these guys produce? Sutton, Fant, Albert, Hamler, Jeudy, Melvin, Lindsey, etc.
Yeah, we were way above consensus on Cortland Sutton last year, and I think that I'm going to end up being way below consensus on him this year, because I think that the addition of Jeudy, the fact that he's like I'm seeing him really, really highly ranked and really, really high in terms of early ADP. Then you first round pick Jeudy, you add in the second round pick KJ Hamler, you add in the uncertainty of just Drew Lock is still an unknown. I know that he went 4-1 or whatever in his 5 starts last year, but I think he was still really up and down, and just there have not been many successes among quarterbacks drafted in the second round historically. Also, I think that they're going to be kind of a run first team. They are coached by a defensive minded coach in Vic Fangio, so I think there's not going to be a ton of volume offensively, and I think that Cortland Sutton is going to be a guy that people overdraft this year after they way underdrafted him last year.
Yeah, I wanted to be high on Noah Fant coming into this year, but man, there's a lot of mouths to feed there, so it's going to be something to watch. I don't think Albert O is necessarily a threat to Noah Fant, But that said, you start giving targets to Judy and Hamler and Sutton and Melvin, and then all of a sudden you're not left with too many for Noah Fant. So there's gonna be plenty of tight ends and kind of Darren Waller, hopefully the next Darren Waller guys that we can talk about as the offseason moves along. But I think right now, kind of a lot of these Broncos guys are probably going too high, as Evan alluded to. All right, let's go to our friend Bill O'Brien, who only made 5 picks in this draft, none in the first round, of course. Didn't do much in the fifth round from a skill perspective. Didn't do much in the fifth round. He takes Isaiah Coulter. I think the story, at least coming out of the draft, was Kenny Stills was on the trade block. They didn't let him go. He's really redundant with Brandon Cooks and with Will Fuller. Wouldn't be surprised at all, especially after they took Coulter, to see Kenny Stills just move on in some way. Anything to say about what the blob Bob did?
Nothing particularly interesting. I think that you touched on it. The backfield, I think, has a chance to be interesting. I mean, David Johnson is in line for a lot of volume.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't bad early last season before he got injured, although back injuries just in general are terrifying, I think. And then can Duke Johnson take a step forward? I mean, Duke Johnson had fewer than 8 touches per game. He was at like 7.9 touches per game last year. He was still his usual very efficient self. It's just that, he's been typecast by Hugh Jackson and Bill O'Brien as just a scat back. They gave him a 3rd-round pick for him. Like, use him. Use this guy that's like very efficient, and they did it. So I think that is going to be a big topic as we dive deeper into the summer. And then those 4 receivers, how is that all going to shake out? I'm with you. I mean, they paid Randall Cobb. They traded for Brandon Cooks. Will Fuller is the best receiver on the team. So it looks like Kenny Stills could be the odd man out.
Yep. Let's go to a more interesting situation out of the draft, and that's the Indianapolis Colts, because they used each of their first 2 picks on skill position players. Let's talk about the running back situation first. Jonathan Taylor, I don't think, we talked about yesterday how Kerryon and DeAndre Swift are complements to each other. I don't think Taylor and Marlon Mack are complements to each other. They kind of do the same things. It's just Taylor does them better, right? Like Taylor is just faster and stronger and way more productive in college. So I think Marlon Mack is in a world of trouble here with Jonathan Taylor coming into one of the league's best offensive lines. I certainly think Jonathan Taylor can play well and have a big role this year. We're going to have to see about the pass down work, who gets it here between Hines, Taylor, and Mack. And then also they took Michael Pittman at 34 overall. And it seems like the dynasty community is split on how good Michael Pittman actually is. Frank Reich came out with a quote, like just glowing about Michael Pittman. And of course, I don't want to read too much into that because of course he's going to say that. But I think the 3 wide receiver set is likely to be T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman, and Paris Campbell. And maybe Zach Pascal has something to say about that too, but we'll see. But yeah, a lot to talk about with Indy. What do you think first about the running backs?
Yeah, just putting together the top 150, and I started out kind of conservative on Jonathan Taylor, and the more I look at it, the more I want to move him up because it's just a great running environment. I mean, he's a lot better than Marlon Mack, and I actually think that Marlon Mack is really good, but I think that Jonathan Taylor as a ball carrier is a lot better than Marlon Mack. The question to me becomes, Marlon Mack was a good receiving back at USF. He was split out wide from the formation at one of the highest rates, according to Graham Barfield's running back study. And I remember watching him and being like, man, this guy, looks like he's going to be a good receiving back in the NFL. And he just hasn't been used in that capacity. And he's been there with Nyheim Hines, who is, like a receiving only back. But Nyheim Hines isn't very good. So could they maybe move Marlon Mack into more of a receiving role? Because as we discussed, Mike Renner on the Mike Renner show before the draft, Jonathan Taylor does not have a very promising track record as a receiving back. He was very limited in terms of his pass blocking opportunities at Wisconsin and dropped 8 of 50 catchable targets during his career and really only had the 1 decent year of receiving there amongst 3. So could Marlon Mack transition into more of the receiving back? That in that way, I think that Marlon Mack could maintain like flex value and then, obviously be a smash if Jonathan Taylor were to go down. But I think that Jonathan Taylor is going to be the lead back, maybe not in week 1, but definitely like by like week 4. And then in the receiver core, I mean, I think it's going to be Pittman and Hilton mainly on the outside, and then Paris Campbell in the slot, and Zach Pascal is the number 4.
Yeah. I wanted to say the general point about running backs this year. Everybody's going to say, I mean, there's so many committees now and so many running backs were drafted that are likely to impact the starter. Everybody's going to say, oh, well, but, Jonathan Taylor could lose work to Marlon Mack or, oh, well, Aaron Jones could lose work to AJ Dillon, Jamal. I mean, we need to stop using that as like a huge knock on guys because almost everybody has it. And the guys who aren't in a committee are going to stand out as just obvious locks, but we're gonna have to really start considering even in DFS guys who are part of committees. It's just the way that the NFL is going to play now. Just kind of is what it is. And yeah, I mean they took Pittman at 34th overall, so it's very clear, at least to me, that I think he's gonna be one of the starters on the outside. Even though I think Zach Pascal is a bit underrated. One of the surprises of the draft for me, at least, was that maybe not a surprise. Jacksonville tried to trade Leonard Fournette and found no takers. I still think there's a chance they just outright dump Leonard Fournette. I mean, this dude has had a questionable attitude, and after having his name shopped all off season, I don't know how he's going to respond to that. I think they should probably just let him go. But then they didn't take any running backs, so that leaves them with just Raquel Armstead, the 5th rounder, and Devine Zigbo, #team preseason. We'll get to Laviska Shenault in a minute here, but how do you think the running backs play out? Do you think they can just outright cut Lenny? And if so, I mean, can they really go to the season with Raquel and Devine Zigbo as their running backs?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at right now. So if they were to cut Leonard Fournette, they would save 4.2 million. If they designated him a post June 1 cut, it looks like it would be the same. I mean, they can save money by cutting. They'll have some dead cap, but that's who cares,
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that it makes sense for them to move on in some ways, but yeah, I mean, I think that he's really rubbed the coaching staff the wrong way, and at the end of the day, like that might be the reason that they would be willing to just flat out cut him. I think they would take anything for him at this point. I mean, I think they would take like a conditional 7th round pick, which is worth about as much as a bag of punctured footballs.
Yeah. So that's something to track. At least I had Raquel on my winners list, and a couple of people, gave me backlash on that. I don't think people realize how likely it is that Lenny is not going to be with the Jaguars once the season comes around. I want to talk about Shenault.
And Ozigbo is an interesting sleeper too. I mean, this is a guy who, I was doing these dynasty startup drafts, like 30 rounds, and like this dude wasn't even getting drafted in them.
Yeah.
So I think he's a guy to pick. He's probably on a lot of dynasty waiver wires right now. If you have open waivers, just put him on the end of your bench.
Yeah, so from the receiving core, they go ahead and take Laviska Shenault at 42nd overall. I think the biggest threat here is to D.D. Westbrook, who has underwhelmed in big-time opportunities. I mean, I've lost money playing D.D. Westbrook in the DFS plenty. I think their best 3-wide set right now is probably DJ Chark and Chris Conley on the outside, Shenault in the slot. Do you think that's how the Jaguars are going to see it?
I don't know. I mean, I think that they're going to give D.D. Westbrook another year. I mean, he wasn't very good last year, but I mean, Laviska Shenault was like a wildcat quarterback at Colorado, kind of like a Cordero Patterson sort of player. Had some medical concerns, or might have been a fringe 1st-round pick. He wound up going 42nd overall, which is still pretty high. But I don't know. I just don't know how it's going to go with Laviska Shenault in Jacksonville. I really have no idea.
Let's go to the Kansas City Chiefs. We spent a lot of time on Friday talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think the hype is, I mean, I've seen people like, national fantasy guys have Clyde Edwards-Helaire as like an early 2nd-round pick in season long, which seems very aggressive to me given what Damian Williams was able to do when given opportunities last year. Where do you think you'll end up being on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, not in Dynasty, in redraft?
Unfortunately, like way below consensus. I mean, you're right. I've seen people like putting him as like a fringe 1st-round pick. That's crazy. I mean, look, it's a great situation, but he's not going to get the full workload. I mean, there's no way. They have a bunch of good backs there. DeAndre Washington is good too. It's a great fit for the offense. I've been reading the post-draft press conferences, and their GM Brett Veach is like, you need multiple backs. We're not there. There was this narrative that Andy Reid will only use, he will only have a workhorse. He never has a committee. And then they had one of the widest ranging committees in the NFL last year. Those coaching narratives really, they're shaky. They're shaky. So, and I think that there's no way that they're just going to give up on Damian Williams. I mean, when healthy, he might still be the best back on the team, just from an all-around standpoint. Like, again, in the Super Bowl, one of the most impressive things that he did against that awesome 49ers front is just pass block like a maniac. And he was out there breaking tackles. He's one of the best receivers. I mean, what running backs can run a wheel route as well as Damian Williams? This guy is not going to go away. And I mean, I think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is such a great fit there. But man, I don't think it's out of the question that Damian Williams they just split the workload right down the middle.
Yeah, agreed. And I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is obviously a much better dynasty prospect right now than he is a redraft prospect if the market's going to settle in the early second round on him in redraft. Let's go to the Las Vegas Raiders. I still think a questionable pick with Henry Ruggs first overall. I think you're probably higher on him than I am. But I wanted to talk about, we talked about that on Friday. I wanted to talk about Josh Jacobs because I had him on my losers list, and I don't think many people had thought about this, but they have Jalen Richard, and then they add Lynn Bowden at 80th overall. And I want to see Josh Jacobs take a leap in the pass game, but it seems like that's not in the cards. I mean, you don't take Lynn Bowden, you don't have Jalen Richard on the team if you think that Josh Jacobs is going to be a true 3-down back. He's going to play in your 2-minute. He's going to play in your 4-minute. And then you start giving more targets to Henry Ruggs, to Bryan Edwards than you would have to guys like Tyrell Williams and stuff like that. So now you're really, squeezing Josh Jacobs' potential targets when he was only at 2 a game last year. So I thought Josh Jacobs was a little bit of a loser here. I know that's kind of a off the radar take a little bit, but yeah, what do you think about what the Raiders did?
I completely agree. And if you read Mike Mayock's comments in his post-draft press conference when he was asked about Lynn Bowden, he said repeatedly, he's going to play running back here.
Yeah,
running back here. He began his statement, Lynn Bowden is going to be a running back here. And he talked about Lynn Bowden, and he said he's going to be a running back here. He said it several times. They listed Lynn Bowden as a running back on the website. The card that Roger Goodell read Bowden as a running back. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that they're going to have him throw the football a little bit. He actually passed for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns this past year. John Gruden likes the trick play stuff. And, yeah, they gave Jalen Richard a 2-year, $7 million deal. That's not peanuts at the running back position anymore. So, I think that there's absolutely concern about Josh Jacobs from a receiving standpoint. And, it looks like it could get worse than it was last year.
Yeah, which would be hard. As I said, just 2 targets per game. Our friend Fantasy Mansion, who, Evan skewers GMs with once a year on Fantasy Mansion's podcast, he has been giving out the hot take that Bryan Edwards has a serious chance to outproduce Henry Ruggs as a member of the Raiders. What do you think about that hot take? And do you think Bryan Edwards has immediate impact on this Raiders offense?
Love Matt Kelly, but that's a real hot take. I mean, Matt Kelly is very much, by the book from a metric standpoint, and Henry Ruggs did not have great production within the confines of the Alabama offense. What you have to do is kind of, take that with some context, because they had Jerry Jeudy, they had Devonta Smith, who apparently might be better than all these guys. They had Jalen Waddle, who's going to get drafted next year. So, they had 4 receivers that are going to play in the NFL. And so, Henry Ruggs went number 12 overall in the draft. Draft capital, I think, matters. And I think that Henry Ruggs has a great skill set. The thing is that skill set going to mesh with Derek Carr? Because Derek Carr's game has never been to throw the ball downfield at a voluminous rate. And, Bryan Edwards, he's going to have to get on the field first. And that means he's probably going to have to beat out Tyrell Williams, right? They've got Hunter Renfrow and Nelson Aguilar behind him. Henry Ruggs is going to play, and obviously. And then so Brian Edwards will have to beat out Tyrell Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's not. I don't know. I don't know if I would consider that likely.
Yeah. And this is almost certainly, as Corinne mentioned, almost certainly Tyra Williams last year with the Raiders. So we'll see. Something to monitor there. Let's go to the Chargers. We talked on Friday about the Justin Herbert pick a little bit. They did take Josh Kelly in the 4th round, and I was a little bit disappointed with that because I think Justin Jackson could have handled like the pounder role behind Austin Eckler pretty well. I maybe disagreed. I mean, 4th round, 112th overall isn't a ton of draft capital, but there's a lot of people out there that think Josh Kelly will easily beat out Justin Jackson for that role. And I bring it up. I normally wouldn't even bring up like a 4th round running back, but I actually think that this role behind Austin Eckler is going to have some value as the pounder role, whoever can win it between Kelly and Justin Jackson. So what do you think about that? And then any more thoughts on Herbert since we last talked about him on Friday?
Just doing this one, putting together this top 150 and looking at other rankings and looking at ADP. I think I'm going to be way lower than consensus on Austin Eckler, which I don't like to be because I love Austin Eckler, and we were way above consensus on him last year. But I mean, just as long as Tyrod Taylor is playing, then I'm worried about Austin Eckler. I mean, he had 90 catches last year. I'm worried about him losing like 30 catches.
Yeah.
Scored 8 receiving touchdowns last year. I mean, at best, I think you could project him for 4. And I just think that this is going to be – I mean, how long is it going to take for Justin Herbert to get on the field? I think that they can kind of win with Tyrod Taylor. I mean, I think that him as being sort of like, a component of the offense, not necessarily the engine of the offense. I think that they can have a pretty decent offense and or at least like a competitive offense, and defensively, like they're going to be able to win games with their defense. I mean, their defense is freaking loaded. Got even better with Kenneth Murray, who they traded up for, wound up with 2 first-round picks. He's going to be in the middle of their defense with Derwin James. Like they're gearing up to stop, within their division, the tight ends like Travis Kelce and Darren Waller and Noah Fant. I mean, they're now to kind of deal with those guys. And I think they're going to be kind of like a not fun offense anymore. And I'm worried about the production of really all the Chargers. Like I just found myself being like way lower than, everyone on Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and Hunter Henry is almost a guy that's like, yeah, I don't want these guys on my fantasy team this year.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, big difference going from Phillip Rivers, who can just absolutely stack it up in garbage time, versus Tyrod Taylor, where if he gets into garbage time, I don't think that it's going to be nearly as productive. And I think Chargers will try to win games in different ways, obviously, with Tyrod Taylor. And I think Evan and I both agree that Anthony Lynn loves Tyrod, very likely to be their week 1 starter. I don't think that he'll finish the year as a starter. I think they'll get Justin Herbert in there, but yeah, we'll see. All right, let's go to the Dolphins, our Dolphins. The Dolphins did not take any skill players after they took Tua at 5th overall until they took Malcolm Perry down at 246th overall in the 7th round. They did, however, make a trade for Matt Breida. And Matt Breida, I wish I could say that he was going to get a full workload in Miami, but coaches just love Jordan Howard, man. And coaches love giving the ball to Jordan Howard. So I think it'll be a pretty strict committee there. The biggest takeaway, though, I had from this Dolphins draft was no wide receivers, no tight ends. I mean, Preston Williams and Mike Gesicki are set up to be every down players again. As long as Ryan Fitzpatrick is out there YOLOing, man, I think Preston Williams and Mike Gesicki could both have really big years. I'm excited for them. I made Gesicki the cover boy of my fantasy winners article. So, a Darren Waller-esque kind of breakout, I think, is in the cards for Mike Gesicki, assuming Ryan Fitzpatrick remains the starter. So what do you think about what the Dolphins did, or I guess more importantly, didn't do?
Pretty much the same as you, man. I think that Tua, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how long Tua takes to get onto the field. There was some thought that the more he sits, the better his health projection will be. Like if he sits out the season, then if he's just the backup all year, then his health projection is better going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Fitzpatrick, played really well for the Dolphins, obviously down the stretch, showed a great ability to deliver to the ball to all those guys that you mentioned. and I think that they have a lot of faith in him, and I think they're going to try to be competitive this year. Matt Breida, yeah, I think it's going to be. I think Jordan Howard's going to lead the team in carries, and Matt Breida is just going to be like an explosive change of pace player. It's a better situation at this point, I think, for him to be in Miami than it would have been in San Francisco. But yeah, I think that he's going to be. I don't know. He'll be a late round fantasy pick.
Let's go to the New England Patriots because everybody was thinking, hey, will they take a quarterback? Will they not take a quarterback? They don't take a quarterback. And, Jeff Howe, friend of the show, sent a tweet that people he's talked to think, and maybe this is biased, but think that Jarrett Stidham actually would have graded out better than Jordan Love this year. I don't know how true that is, but we've talked about before. Jarrett Stidham in the preseason was awesome. That said, as I previously mentioned a little bit ago, Andy Dalton is now available for the Patriots. So it's interesting. They have some options. I kind of think they should just stick with Stidham and see what they have in him, but who knows what they are going to do. They did take a couple tight ends. They didn't address their wide receiver situation. And, we've talked about N'Keal Harry as kind of a second-year breakout guy before. A lot of picks for the Patriots as usual. What do you think of their draft?
Wasn't a very fun draft, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the two tight ends. Asiasi is like, I think he's going to be more like the Y tight end, like the on the line tight end. And then Dalton Keene he was the number one spark tight end in this year's draft. So he would be more of like the F movement tight end, I think, if you were to compare him to Gronk and Hernandez. Obviously, neither of them is going to be remotely as good as Gronk or Hernandez, but Asiasi would be more the Gronk, and then Keene would be more the Hernandez. N'Keal Harry was a big winner. Mohamed Sanu, even kind of, it's gross. I know it's gross.
Yeah.
It's just, let's not talk about Mohamed Sanu. Out of the backfield is going to be interesting to sort out too. Like, will Damian Harris get an opportunity? They also did not take a running back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Damian Harris barely plays after they used I believe it was a third-round pick on Damian Harris last year. And I think N'Keal Harry is going to gain steam as the offseason moves along in terms of ADP. I think if you're just, trying to beat ADPs, N'Keal Harry now versus later will make sense. I mean, God, Julian Edelman has to be on tilt. He's going to be 34 years old, and we know Sanu is dusted. Let's go to the New York Jets. If we look at this offseason as a whole, I actually like it for Sam Darnold, man. And I know you have worries because all these guys are new and they haven't had an offseason together. But if they did, and if they could somehow click, I mean, Darnold gets Chris Herndon back. He adds Brashad Perriman, who I thought was an awesome signing. They give him Denzel Mims in the second round. At 10th overall, they give him Mekhi Becton. And they still have Le'Veon Bell and Crowder. Like, they could actually have a really good offense. Like, last preseason, their offense looked awesome. And then it just all fell apart very quickly with Sam Darnold getting the mono. So I don't know. I'm optimistic on the Jets. Like, I don't know if you're planning on including the Jets in your sneaky stacks for best ball, but they would be one that would be super, super sneaky for me. Like, if you think Denver or the Giants or whatever is going to be too popular, like, the Jets stack would be even way sneakier. So maybe I'm crazy here. And the reason I don't even like saying it is because Adam Gase is such a dunce. I hate putting money on Adam Gase, but yeah, it kind of is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's and we kind of have that with the Giants too. Like, how much faith do we really want to put in Jason Garrett? At the end of the day, like, we're going to end up betting on the players, but that definitely makes you feel uncomfortable. I mean, I think that Brashad Perriman is good. I think that he's always been good. I think that what happened in Baltimore was that he had that horrible PCL injury. And then if you go back, like, I've read articles on this, reading about, like, he fell into a depression. His dad got really sick. And I mean, just, he had to get out of there. He goes to Cleveland. And I mean, he played really well in his opportunities in Cleveland. And then he was awesome over the final five games of last year for Tampa Bay. Like, he was really freaking good. He has not been dropping passes for a long time. That was, a problem for him in Baltimore. He has stayed healthy, knock on wood. And I mean, I think he's always been good. It's just that he had, like, it was just a really bad situation in Baltimore. He had this like shin splints injury.
Yeah. He also went bald. He also went bald.
Oh my God. um, yeah. So, but at the end of the day, like I think I'm gonna lean toward betting on guys that Sam Darnold already has built a rapport with, like Jamison Crowder and maybe Chris Herndon to
Yeah.
some extent.
I love Chris. I think Chris Herndon's like we were too high on him last year with the suspension and everything. That was one of the mistakes, and we talked about that on a previous podcast. But if you can get Chris Herndon for a full season, he was ready to have a really big year. I thought
Yeah.
last year. You didn't talk about Denzel Mims at all. One of the prospects that, from a size speed perspective, I think when we talked to Josh Norris, you and him were both really high on Denzel Mims. What do you think about this landing spot?
There's a lot of opportunity. So I think you have to love the landing spot. And
Yeah,
is only on a 1 year deal, and I think it's a great landing spot for Denzel Mims.
agreed. Okay, let's go to the Steelers. And, they had a reasonable three wide set with James Washington, Deontay Johnson, and Juju in the slot. They had Ebron and Vance McDonald. They didn't need to, but they took Notre Dame wide receiver Chase Claypool at 49th overall. Some controversy, and Steelers Twitter got a hold of a tweet that I sent about uh, uh, Claypool play on the outside, and they were just like arguing for like 4 straight days about how Chase Claypool should be used in my mentions. But anyways,
I know
they
how
say
that is, man.
yeah,
The team fans arguing in your mentions just for
right,
days on end.
exactly. Like the
Like
fantasy people
you're
don't.
not going to convince the other side, like
Yeah, the team fans are way more out of control than the fantasy people. But anyways,
oh yeah.
Steelers say they're going to use Chase Claypool on the outside. Do you think he'll be able to beat out James Washington? My initial take was just going to be a kind of a rotation there between James Washington and Claypool, maybe with Juju in
Yeah.
the slot and Deontay on the other side.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But I do think that it's kind of clear that they're going to play him on the outside, though, and that he's going to be competing with James Washington. And we probably won't care about that initially. We're going to be way above consensus on Deontay Johnson this year and Juju.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Juju was borderline first round pick last year. I'm seeing with a third round ADP, we're going to have Juju on all our teams this year with Big Ben coming back. The running back situation I also think is interesting. The Steelers are going to be in the sneaky stacks for sure because I don't know, people are just way down on James Conner, and he's a winner in the draft. I mean, they did take Anthony McFarland, but McFarland's like a speed explosion, change of pace back, and James Conner I think is still clearly. I mean, James Conner was good last year. It's just he kept getting banged up.
Yeah. I didn't put James Conner in my winners because I still think they want to use a committee with Samuels and Benny Snell and McFarlane. But you could be right. Maybe they will consider him more of a workhorse, and so we'll see.
It's just that he's so low in like ADP and other rankings that
Right.
I want to be above that because I think that he's going to end up being a great value. Like we're gonna want him on our teams. I think this year.
All right, let's go to the Tennessee Titans. They take a Jack Conklin replacement at 29th overall in Isaiah Wilson, which I think should help. And then, backup running back to Derrick Henry. They took, hopefully they hope, 93rd overall, Darrington Evans. Not too much else of note with the Titans draft. Anything on them?
No, it's just clear that they are going to maintain the same offensive philosophy as they had last season. And Derrick Henry is going to continue to be the focal point of the offense. And you're probably going to be mad at me for how high I have him in the rankings.
The big dog. God.
Yeah.
All right. Big dog, back for more. All right. We have talked about every single NFL team's draft and how that relates to fantasy. On the site, you will find tons more written content. On YouTube, you will find our disgusting faces there if you can bear yourself to see them. We'll be back next week for more shows and more content. So, for Evan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.